So Jim Jones was the leader of the infamous Jonestown Cult. He was a reverend, an evangelical Christian, someone charming and charismatic, and he eventually convinced his followers to move with him to Africa, where he then got them to drink Kool-Aid laced with poison. In the end, ultimately 900 of his followers lost their lives. This is where if somebody's making fun of an organization's beliefs, they say, "Don't drink the Kool-Aid." This is where that comes from. Now, it would be easy to write these people off as uneducated, or dumb, or brainwashed sheep. But there's a book called The Untold Story of Reverend Jim Jones and His People. And the author states they were just decent, hardworking people, socially conscious people, some of them highly educated. These were just people who genuinely wanted to help their fellow man and serve God. So what makes a cult? How do you know if you're in one? What makes Christianity different? And what does the Bible have to say? Let's take a look.
Attention, bargain shoppers.
So cults, they're actually not as easy to define as you would think. I mean, the beliefs of many organizations fall on a spectrum, and it's sometimes hard to tell exactly where that line is before they spill over into being a cult. The literal definition is a system of religious devotion directed towards a person or an object. Okay. So that pretty much defines every religion. A secondary definition is a misplaced or excessive admiration of a particular person or thing. All right, so this is a little more helpful, but judging whether a belief is misplaced is very subjective. I mean, many people in Jesus' day viewed he and his followers as a cult. I mean, here you have this small yet passionate subsect of Judaism who believes that the Messiah has come. Pretty out there stuff. So there isn't really a general consensus as to what makes a cult. And the word is actually a little bit unhelpful because people often use it in a pejorative way, labeling an organization that they don't like as a cult simply because it has different beliefs than they do. So it might be easier to frame it as a healthy organization versus an unhealthy one. Much like a relationship can be healthy or it can be toxic or anywhere in between. The same is true of churches or religious groups. So what are some things to look out for? Well, there are some questions you can ask yourself when trying to identify a cult. Question number one, how insular are they? Matthew 28:19 says, "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit." This is Jesus' commission to us, to gather followers, to be inviting, to bring people in, as many people as possible. Jesus likens God's invitation to us in Matthew 22 as like inviting guests to a wedding banquet. Then he said to his servants, "The wedding banquet is ready, but those I invited did not come. So go to the street corners and invite to the banquet anyone you find." So all should be welcome with Jesus. But oftentimes with cults or toxic groups, they're very suspicious of outsiders. It can often be very difficult to become part of the in-group. There might be a bunch of hoops you have to jump through or things you have to do before you're fully trusted. Which brings us to a second question you could ask. Is acceptance by the group used as a manipulation tool? Oftentimes, toxic groups will try to isolate people, cause them to be as dependent on the group as possible. This is much like how in a toxic relationship, they might limit access to friends and family. Religious groups can do this too. And once you're in, they will push conformity. And they will use the possibility of being pushed out of the group as pressure, as fear, intimidation. This is called excommunication. And this is actually a biblical concept. Jesus taught about it. Paul doubled down by saying if somebody is sinning egregiously in the church and they're refusing to change, then we need to kick them out of the group. But there's a couple important distinctions. First, it's not meant to be used as a manipulation tool. The errors need to be pretty egregious. An example Paul gives is somebody is participating in incest and he refuses to stop. And even then, there should be a plan for restoration. In 2 Corinthians chapter 2, he kind of gives an example. "The punishment inflicted on him by the majority is sufficient. Now instead, you ought to forgive and comfort him so that he will not be overwhelmed by excessive sorrow. I urge you, therefore, to reaffirm your love for him." Another important distinction is that the Bible never instructs a small group of people or a couple of individuals to do this. Excommunication is meant to be a formal action taken by the entire church after multiple attempts have been made to rectify the situation. And a third question you could ask is Is there authoritarianism without accountability? You see, a healthy group invites discussion. James 1:19 tells us, "Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger." With an unhealthy group, you won't be allowed to question things. They'll want you to just go along with them. They also usually have a leader with an excess amount of power over the group. So keep in mind, when you're starting to go to a new church or an organization, they're not going to be hitting you over the head with these things right away. But there will be signs. Look to their leadership and how it functions. Ask yourself, are they transparent? Who are they accountable to? Most churches are set up in such a way that they have a lead pastor who is accountable to a board of directors. Every church calls them something different. Some call them deacons, some call them elders. But in a healthy organization, there are usually multiple levels of accountability, both internally and externally if they're part of a wider denomination. So there are definitely toxic and unhealthy groups out there. It is important to have a discerning eye when attending a new church. However, I will say this. All churches, no matter where you are made up of imperfect people. There is no perfect church. Just because somebody is grouchy to you one Sunday morning doesn't mean the organization is bad. All churches have their problems, but some good questions to ask are, on the whole, are they open and inviting? Do they use fear to pressure and manipulate people? And is there accountability and transparency with their leadership? So that's what I got for you today. I hope you found it interesting. If you did, please feel free to like and subscribe. It does help out the channel. I'll leave the verses used today in the description. Also, feel free to leave a comment. That helps out as well. My name is Adam. This is Bargain Bin Theology. And remember, you get what you pay for.